Hello, this is Dan Geltuck. Excited to be back with another episode of Sounds of Solidarity for Episcopal City Mission and for the Finding Our Way Home grant making program. We have a very special guest on this episode, Taina Vargas, longtime healer and social justice leader in Roxbury and around Boston and around the state. And we're really excited to hear more from Taina. This is a special episode because we are going to focus specifically on an event that Taina helped to organize, which was a healing and wellness fair that we had a couple of weeks ago for the Burgess Urban Fund grantees to provide them with healing resources and nourishment in this really, really hard time. And we're going to focus this episode on that, which, as people probably remember, is part of the larger vision for Finding Our Way Home, which seeks to provide healing, spirituality, care, those sorts of resources for BIPOC organizers, movement folks leading on the front line. And so excited to have another chance to talk about those themes. So Taina, welcome. I just wanted to start by creating space for you to introduce yourself. So anything you want to share, about your vision for healing and social justice and what that looks like for you, please.
Hello. My name is Taina. I use she, her pronouns. And let's see, I wear many hats. As an herbalist, I like to say I carry many baskets. I'm a mother, first of all. I am the daughter of immigrants. I was 11 when my family migrated from the Dominican Republic and we landed in New York. So my identity, is center in being the child of immigrants, but also someone with mixed race, and also understanding the historical complexity of my ancestry. And I feel like that has shaped a lot of the work that I do as a parent, as a community organizer, educator. I would say an artist as well, and a healer. Now, for me, so all of those things inform one another. And I've been an educator for the best part of 20 years at this point. I started as a youth worker in New York, where I first lived after migrating. And early on, I understood as a 14-year-old camp counselor that it was my responsibility to make sure that the nurturing that I received at home and also in my community that I passed that down. And many years later, I ended up in arts education and youth programming that focus on social justice work. A lot of it centralized in the arts, but also looking at the role of the artist in, um, initiating and leading change in social transformation, positive transformation. And I would say most recently, I've been taking the role of healer through herbalism. Though I like to think that the arts and the youth empowerment community work has also been part of the healing work that I do. And, they all meet at the intersection of wanting to understand historical patterns and disrupting the patterns that don't serve the wellness of all people, in particular people of color. Um, so a lot of the work that I do centralizes community wellness by understanding individual wellness and making sure that we have the resources that we need to be able to not just survive, which I think is what a lot of us do, but to thrive and to do that in a way that doesn't take away from anybody else's. We're getting the resources that we need to be able to be better versions of ourselves as individuals, as parents, as people who are focusing on change making, so we can make a better world without sounding like too romantic, but leaving the planet better than we found it, and empowering our youth to continue to do that work. And so as a mom of an almost 12-year-old, I feel like for me it's important to model wellness, and also to model empathy and understanding, and also to share the responsibility of community wellness. And a lot of the times, at home, we talk about what it looks like to support each other, but also how to take care of one another, um, and also taking care of ourselves. So not giving and not having anything for ourselves. And I think that segues into the work that we've been doing recently with the wellness event that we recently hosted, where we created a day of wellness for our grantees who are doing the hard grassroots work, of organizing their communities and being those change makers that we need in this time, in this 2025, um, and making sure that people understand that it's not selfish, to take care of ourselves, especially when our work centralizes the wellness of the collective. And so we had set some goals at the beginning of our planning stages, and hopefully, those goals were met. I'd love to hear what our grantees took away now that they've had some time to reflect. But we had talked about creating a space where people can um, get resourced, to connect with practitioners in our community. We have a wealth of knowledge in our community, a wealth of skills, and we don't need to leave our communities, and to be able to get people into our spaces that can support with healing, whether it's a healing circle or looking at different healing modalities. And the I would say the main goal was to create community where we could share, some of those resources, share best practices, and expand our healing network. Just through the conversations that we had during that day that we met, it was beautiful to hear um, what people wanted and needed, but also hearing that the people that could provide those were in the room. Whether they themselves, some of the grantees, and also some of the participants, and understanding that we have what we need is a matter of connecting people with the skills and the knowledge and those tools and resources. So I would say we succeeded. We created a space. People showed up. People took what they needed. We're hoping that this is one of many, right? Because as the challenges of our times evolve, so do our needs, and the resources, I think, have to also match the need. So yeah.
Thanks, Dana. I was wondering if you could share, was there like a moment or two or a particular thing you remember from the healing fair that you're like, wow, this was really powerful, or I think this person really benefit. Anything kind of come to mind that was really meaningful that you experienced at the healing fair that you could share with folks?
Mhm. So many, so many. I would say one in particular that really stuck out. We had a herbal tea formulating workshop, and we were looking at some herbs that support our nervous system. And there was a person in the room who he's from Central America, and his background is in farming flowers, right, for the floral industry. And he had talked about how he grew up, you know, cultivating roses that would end up in bouquets and the Valentine's gifts that people would give each other. And he never thought that he could actually make medicine with the roses. We had talked about roses being the symbol of love, not because of Valentine's, but because the roses themselves are medicinal to our body, especially, our heart. There's medicine in the rose flower that supports the physical heart. It's an astringent plant, and it tightens the fibers and the muscles of the heart, but also supports the emotional aspect of our heart. The part that helps us process difficult experiences. And for him, having that, connection to this plant that he grew up cultivating and working with, I don't know if he got to take some of those flowers home, if he got to have a bouquet to put in a jar at home, but that was his work growing up. And so for him bringing that, to me, that felt like a really beautiful full circle moment. And then also like just hearing people reflect during our sharing circles and people feeling like receiving wellness was so somebody used the word spoiled, like, and to me it made me really sad to be reminded that wellness sometimes is considered a luxury that not everybody has access to, or the definition of wellness has been so co-opted, that people feel like wellness is only something that some and not all could access. And so for someone to have a moment in their, at the beginning of their work week where they were feeling resourced and taken care of, that they somehow didn't feel like they deserve to receive that. And, those two moments are the two that really resonate. I had a lot of one-on-one conversations where people were really excited to be there. Like they genuinely felt, that even though they hadn't thought about needing that's something that really helped them start their week. And the hope is that people will practice some of the things that we've explored together, some of the healing best practices that we had shared. But I would say those two in particular really, really resonated. And, I had a moment of, when the person used the word spoiled to describe how he felt at the end, it's like, I challenge him to find another word, because it's not, taking care of ourselves is not, shouldn't be a luxury. We when we're not well, like if we have a cold or we break a bone, nobody will judge us for seeking medical help. But when we're taking care of our nervous system and supporting one another with like stress management, then that's seen as a luxury. It's seen as an added item, which I don't think, our mental and emotional wellness are not separate from our physical wellness. And we know that when we don't take care of our whether it's spiritual or emotional or um other forms of wellness, that eventually we pay with our physical health. So having those reminders, that there is a lot of work to be done, and that people need to reminder that if you don't have, you can't give, right? And it's okay to pour into ourselves before we pour back into our communities. Because I know those folks went home and they probably checked their email and they caught up on everything they missed. Um, and I imagine that, their busy week, hopefully was a little easier to manage because they had that moment to take care of themselves and do that in community.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I also have a lot of really powerful memories. I got to make some tea as well. That was really fun, and I have that. I'm excited to try that at home. Maybe one final question to leave folks with. What are your thinking about this? If we were to figure out how to make this healing fair, as accessible as needed to all the movement workers and to all the folks leading this work. And we were able to kind of really just bring this at a much larger scale, like, doing it regularly. And like you said, it's not a privilege, but it's, folks have access to this. How would our movements be different?
Hmm, that's a great question. I started my activism through the arts when I was in my early 20s. And I saw a lot of who are now my elders, completely burn themselves out because they went to every community meeting. They were at every rally. They were at every organizing. And eventually those folks, a lot of folks would altogether stop organizing because they couldn't. Their health took a big toll. And I always wonder if we restructure how we organize. If we understood that it's a marathon. It's not, and that is going to take a long time, right? Because the work that we're doing now, we're not the first to do it, and we won't be the last. If people understood that it's okay to rest when we need to, it's okay to step back and resource and refuel, that I feel like our movement would be a lot more efficient because we see the same faces at every rally. We see every face at every meeting, and it's people still have to take care of themselves and their families. And it took me becoming a mom to understand that I couldn't be at every rally. I couldn't be at every community gathering. And so becoming a mom really forced me to slow down. My son is turning 12 soon, and I felt like his 10th birthday was kind of the marker where I felt like I was ready to come back. And so I've re-engaged, but also I have boundaries now, because I'm a parent, I now have boundaries that I'm able to enforce and respect my own boundaries, and understanding that when I need to rest, I need to rest. I'm no use to the movement if I'm not well, and I think if I think we can get our community to understand that, and that it is the responsibility of the community to take care of its members, that and also like not isolate or not guilt trip people when they say, sorry, I can't make it to that meeting. I just can't because I have more than I can handle. But instead, if we say, hey, okay, so you've been at every meeting, don't come to the next one, and instead get some extra sleep. Or I can't go to the meetings, but I brought food because people still got to eat. And I think it's understanding our role in the movement, and not every role needs to be played by every person. That's not how movement works. And I think if we're able to understand our strengths and plug in where we can and give people space to give what they can, I think things would shift. And so for me as an educator um and a person that works with plants, I know that when I go into spaces, bringing plant medicine for post care is something that I can give people and remind people to actually, if they get a tea blender, they actually go home and make a cup of tea versus just letting it sit on the table. So, and I think just, bringing in what skills I have and tap other people in. At our event, we had folks in so many different healing art forms, um, because we need as many modalities as possible, because we don't always need the same. Sometimes we need a massage or a nap or a cup of tea, right? And I think there's space for all of it. In terms of, I think, future offerings, seasonal might be nice, or as needed as well, right? Because sometimes we can't wait until the next season and responding to need versus working around a calendar that might not always work. And I would say that, wellness needs to be part of movement, just like spirituality needs to be part of movement. Because otherwise we're just moving vessels without purpose, right? But I would say responding to the need as it arises, but also being proactive, not just reactive, right? So having a list of folks that we could dispatch when needed. We know right now with unfolding political climate that there are really specific needs right now in some parts of our community, our vulnerable community, right? So having people ready that can show up and facilitate, that can show up and bring resources. Um, I like to think of it as having, like, what's our mutual aid plan? How are we going to activate and deploy folks? So we're not waiting for something to happen and then for us to react, but that we're actually being proactive. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks, Taina, for all that you did to make the healing fair a reality, and that all you're doing every day to make our movements more well and more resourced. And also just thank you for your wisdom and presence today. Really, really appreciate it. And so this is Dan signing off. Thanks for listening to another episode of Sounds of Solidarity. Be well, everyone.